The one thing I hate is hate. And so I always fight that. I fight anti-Semitism. I fight Islamophobia, the stereotypes that exist there. I fight racism. I fight bigotry. I fight sexism. I fight people who are against the trans community in a certain way. All these communities who just need a little bit of protection.
Hi, my name is Amitai, and I'm the director of the Z3 Project. This is a Z3 Project podcast. On today's episode, I have a conversation with Tehran Von Ghasri, the comedian based out of LA. Our conversation spans a variety of cultures. Tehran's personal and professional trajectory has an incredibly interesting story and a background. I won't give it away. You have to hear the episode to learn more about it. He's an activist online and in other spaces, trying to promote equality and better life for folks around the world. In particular, Tehran, because of his background, is very much involved and highlights and elevates the voices of many in Iran and what's going on there with the social unrest. We had a conversation spanned comedy and identity and the current and the consistent need to listen to the folks who can be cultural translators and mitigate and diminish some of the tensions that we're seeing between some of the groups in America and in other places, and the role of comedy that plays in all this together. Tehran hosts a regular show on Thursdays in the Laugh Factory called Tehran Thursdays. If you're in the area, highly recommend taking a look. His social commentary and his comedy is brilliant, and it was a wonderful conversation. Enjoy the episode. Great. I'm super excited.
Hold on, this is your super excited face? This is your super excited face?
I'm super excited.
That's the energy I want. That's all
okay. We'll get there. I feed off your energy and it will be fun. I was really excited about this specific interview because every call that we've had was always ended in a good feeling, laughing, but was also some real, takeaways and thoughts. And I'm gonna come back to some of them eventually. But I am super excited. And so welcome to our Z3 podcast. I am incredibly honored to be joined here by Tehran. He is a brilliant comedian, social critic. He acts in he has several performances as well. And he's just great. And he was at our conference last year, and he appeared twice, once on a panel that was exploring the range of Jewish life in North America. And then he also closed our event with a performance that left our audience shocked and on the floor in stitches. There were not...
That's because I literally went and just slashed a bunch of people. They actually had to get stitches. Thankfully, there were a lot of doctors in the audience, so it worked out fine.
It worked out well. They didn't expect it. You know what I mean? They typically come for a JCC event. They think they're going to leave, in one piece. But, things... But anyway, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited that you're here.
You're one of my favorite human beings. I appreciate you for having me and all the things you do, by the way, because you're very active and you don't need to be. A lot of people don't realize that activism doesn't make you rich. They always just assume that when they see a bunch of people and there's someone who's organizing them, that somehow that organizer made millions and millions and millions of dollars. Trust me, they do not. And especially with the activism that you do, there's a lot of times the money comes directly out of your pocket, if anything else. So I see that happen all the time. Whenever I was a part of an event or an organization, everyone always thinks that organizer is just bawling. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Even the Jewish ones aren't bawling. Don't worry.
It's the grunt work.
Yeah.
It's the worst of all, because people assume, I mean, this is true in general, but so much so in our context, it's like, oh, you're socially motivated. It's a mitzvah. It's a good deed, and that's your reward. Right. And oh, you want to be part of this other thing? Well, not so much. Exactly. But, nonetheless, it really is great. So what I would really love to achieve is to get to know you a little bit better and our audience to hear that, because I think the origin story is mind blowing and super interesting and can kind of open new avenues for thought for our audiences. And then kind of get into the bigger questions that you deal with and how you deal and think about it and your work and your craft. It's incredibly important, and there's some things that I stuck with me that I'll bring up during our conversation that I think will help us kind of guide us through that thing. So if you want to just start who's Tehran? What are
Well, to me, I'm just Tehran, but to the world at large, the things that people think make me very interesting is not only obviously am I a comedian who performs all over the world, but it's my background story. That background commensurating with this Venn diagram of all these people that I am, and I just happen to be right in the middle. So on my father's side, my father is an Iranian immigrant who came from Iran 30 some years ago to the United States and met my black mother at college. So I'm half Iranian, half black, but then it branches out even further, which is already a rare combo. And then it branches out even further. On my father's side, his family is Muslim and Zoroastrian. So my grandfather was Muslim, my grandmother Zoroastrian, which in Iran was a big deal of a combination. But then on my mother's side, my grandfather is American black, my grandmother Egyptian Jewish, like an Egyptian Jew of color who actually looks at every other Jew and thinks that they're not Jewish, because she's like, we're the ones that didn't, we stayed, right? So looking at that, and there was this big push. A lot of people don't know this, especially the newer generations. In the 60s, actually, the black and Jewish communities were very close. There was a lot of common passions and pursuit, especially as it comes to civil liberties and civil rights. So there was a lot of overlap. In fact, when you watch Martin Luther King on the day of the I Have a Dream speech, you look to his left and you see a rabbi, and that's because that rabbi was his best friend. They were always in support. So there's this push, and there was also a lot of overlap of black people finding Judaism and coming into it. And my grandfather actually, like, as an educated man, wanted to be as educated as possible and met my grandmother at a temple. And a lot of people don't realize, like, my grandmother's lineage is it's Jewish, and that is part of who she is. And all these things are also part of who I am, but it's not the only thing I am, because oftentimes I find people always ask me, "What religion are you?" That's their first question. Their first question is, "What do you feel more black or Iranian?" And the answer is neither, and all of them. That's how that works. That's how being this blend. I'm not a salad where you can take the lettuce and tomato and peel it away. It's like a smoothie. It's a new flavor. I feel whole all the time. And then they'll ask me, what religion am I? That's their pertinent question. It's their profound, what religion are you? And it's so interesting to me because so few people just ask me if I'm a good person. Like, very rarely do people just go, "Are you a good person?" Which I'm not. I'm trash. But the point that
Yeah.
I just want people to realize that there's a lot of layers, that boxes aren't meant for things, are meant for things, and boxes are meant for things and not people. That's the point of my comedy. So that's what makes me the comedian that I am on stage. That's what makes me shocking and surprising, but also has people in stitches, hopefully from laughter, on the floor.
Yeah. So there's something there that, this is the first thing I kind of recall from one of our conversations in preparation for the conference. The panel was a cross section of different individuals and backgrounds and experiences. And someone on the panel asked a very, I think, an honest and like a real question. And it's like, where are you from? Right. And she directed it towards you and one of our other presenters. And she comes from I'd say, pretty traditional background. And what I witnessed as like standing there was, I felt very telling about all kinds of issues that are true for our community and the broader community. But the answers do you remember the answer that you guys gave? Do you remember?
No, I have no idea.
So what she said was like, where are you from? And both you and the other presenter were like, my maternal grandmother is Jewish, right? And which could have easily been like, I'm from LA, or I'm from Brooklyn, or I'm from, right?
Because
but
we knew what she meant. It happens whenever you're a person, like if you're in a crowd and you're a brown person, for example, and someone goes, "Where are you from?" They don't mean San Bernardino. They mean, where did your original heritage come from? And even though you could be first, second, third, fifth generation American, they still mean that. And that's an unfortunate side effect of normalization, where we just normalize something. And it's a push that I look forward to, is because I want to express to people of the world, and even people in the Jewish community, that Jews come in all shapes, colors, and sizes. There is no cookie cutter standard Jew. And even though it's obviously, we see that paradigm, the Larry David Jew, a lot,
right,
there's also there's also Avi David, and there's also Yerachmiel David. There are a lot of different Jews that come in that line, and that's where I want people to open their eyes. And it's so interesting, Amitai. I'll tell you something very interesting. So my background's so unique. I have a very good friend. His name is Omar Offendim. He's a Syrian rapper whose family comes from a different religious background. He married his love of his life, his college sweetheart, who is half black, half Jewish. So his children, right now, and it was like one of the most amazing things. Omar was explaining to me how his children are basically asking the questions that I answer in my comedy, and it's because people are now dealing it through him, with him there with the kids, and he's like, I. It's so interesting because you were ahead of the trend. You are the future, and that's what it's really coming down to, is the future.
Yeah, and I think what I find that very compelling, and I totally buy into that approach. That like the future, the dichotomy between groups is breaking down, and that's a great thing because it makes everything more. Yeah, it enriches all of us. My not as quietly as complex as yours, but my wife is fully Yemenite.
Mm-hmm.
This might be shocking. I am fully not Yemenite, but my kids are half and half, and they're like, people are like, what, really? How can those questions?
And it's mind blowing for them.
Yeah.
And to you, it's just, those are my kids. Like there's no need for an explanation. Exactly. People don't even realize even something as simple as that, right? Simple as this, there is no difference. That's the best part. Hate has borders and lines and divisions. Love doesn't.
Right.
Love, you and your wife don't have racial fights. You know what you have? Take out the trash, and you're like, I hate you.
And that's a universal statement. Like, take out the trash. I hate. That's it. Yeah.
That's it. That's real love. Like that's most of the world. We are much more alike than we are different in every single way.
Right.
In every single way.
Right. So when that happened for me, like I've been in similar situations to your point, right? But I can't recall like when the question wasn't towards me and I was like the outsider. So for me, it was like on the one hand, like, whoa. And then it was like, oh, of course. And so like hearing the way you approach it is inspiring because some folks, could and probably should at times take offense with that type of question of like, where are you from is coded as like, are you one of us?
100%. But they're not. Here's the thing about intention. They're not meaning it. They're curious. Most times people are curious. There are times when people are not. They're othering me. But most times people are curious. And even with your children are looking at it. They'll better understand me right away without even asking. That's the future. Right. That's why when people think the world is so bleak, I say, look at the kids. The future is actually very bright. They're more understanding. They're more hopeful. They're more inclusive naturally.
Yeah. So that's, we got right into the thick of it, but like, if we can, so that's the familial background. There's, I know this because we had the conversation, but like, you had a very interesting, I'd say, like education as well. Right. There was like a potential professional.
Exactly.
Yeah. But athlete and the law and the politics and the comedy. So like a really like multi-talented guy. And like maybe walk us through how you ended up, in this role as opposed to others, because you could have easily taken that message and used other platforms as well. Like I can imagine a very successful, politician, ambassador of sorts, carrying this torch of like, this is the future and we got to prepare for it and educate towards it.
My original thought, I have a my degrees are in international politics communications and a master's in economics and a law degree. Now, people think that makes me overeducated and overqualified to be a comedian. And I say, actually, most comedians, you'd be surprised, first of all, how many comedians have law degrees. You'd be shocked. Number two, comedians are not just a lot of ways joke tellers or clowns. Actually, comedians are the modern day philosophers in many ways. It's actually what drew me towards comedy. I originally wanted to somehow make this world a better place. That's what I've always wanted to do. And my original thought was to do so with the law or with politics. And I realized that in a lot of ways, those are corrupted forms now. But
Mm.
with comedy, I can reach everybody. No one's made us think, these modern day philosophers, these comedians, no one's made us think more about race or religion or politics more than comedians, whether it's Dave Chappelle or Jon Stewart or Wanda Sykes or Larry David. We've thought about the things that we should think about. George Carlin, these people made us think in ways that we would never have done so without, at least without some anger on our own. It's the spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down. And
Right.
that's why comedy drew me. And I get to be on stage and talk about my experiences. And people, they not only relate to me, they relate through me. There's a little bit of me in each and every one of my audience.
Yeah. So like the modern day truth teller, I think is very, very, very powerful. And I want to ask a question. Like even though we're podcasting, I'm not a huge consumer of podcasts. There's one that's my favorite. I reached into it accidentally. It's Mark Maron's podcast, where he interviews, I'm sure you know, like mostly comedians, but also, you know, musicians and whatever, but overwhelmingly comedians. And he has this line that he repeats that I find, you know, at first I was like, you know, there's a lack of what's what I'm looking for, integrity in this, because it's coming from a political position. But over time, as I heard it more and like started asking myself about it, I found it to be true, where they're like, sometimes under the guise of truth telling, right, what he would call like hacks, right, people complain about being policed and saying, well, it's only comedy, I'm a social critic, but they use the stage to be to promote still, I'd say, less than positive. I'm trying to be charitable, but less than positive
100%.
messages.
No, there's no, you don't even have to sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
There, just because, okay. So I say this often when it comes to the audience, because we do have a very sensitive times now, political correctness, people get canceled, all these things that happen. We're all very aware of it. The eggshells that we all feel like we're walking on society. And I explain this and I express this all the time. Just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. A lot of times audiences just feel like, oh, I'm offended, so I must be right. Just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. But on the flip side, just because you're offensive as a comedian, it doesn't mean you're funny. There's a fine line in between. And that fine line is where good comedy lies. That fine line right in between. So a lot of comedians, what they do on stage is, once again, it comes down to intention. They go on stage and they say some words and they're punching down. They're punching down. They're not creating new. It's low-hanging fruit. Oh, hey, Jew with the big nose. Ha, ha, ha. That's not funny.
Right.
That's not funny. Hey, black guy who's going to carjack, or Muslim guy who's going to hijack. That's not funny.
Yeah, that's just a hack job. Yeah,
it is. And that happens, unfortunately. And the comedians who then speak in those terms and then have the audacity to be like, oh, you don't understand. No, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But if no one is finding your art beautiful, maybe you just suck at your art. Maybe you're trash. Maybe you're trash. That happens too. But then there are times where there are comedians who are brilliant, who sometimes audiences don't understand the art of comedy. For example, and we've had this discussion in regards to Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle pushes buttons and pushes envelopes. And the idea of it is the reason he's doing it is to create the response of conversation. And that's what we're doing, regardless. If you actually listen to his stance, for example, on the trans community, people focus on the little bits, but the big picture is, what he's saying is, trans people deserve civil rights, but remember, Black people also deserve civil rights. And to communities that support trans and not Black people, then you're also dividing minorities. That's the actual joke that he's saying.
Right.
When he, for example, Dave Chappelle had an SNL, he had the SNL, he had the monologue, which the latest one, where it was about right after the Kanye situation. People listened without the context of comedy and were quick to be offended. But if you notice, Jewish comedians and Jewish writers thought it was brilliant. And the reason why is because he's bringing up the absurdities of Jewish stereotypes. He's bringing up the absurdities of what it is. His big punchline was, just because there are a lot of Jews in Hollywood doesn't mean that they run Hollywood, the same way that there are a lot of black people in I forget the town he said, and he was like, there are a lot of black people there, and we sure don't run that. It's the connections. You have to read with comedy. You have to be along for the entire ride. You can't just take little pieces of content and think it's context. It's not. That's the art of comedy. If you watch a lot of comedians, if you watch just a part of Larry David, you're going to be like, this guy's a horrible person. You have to watch the whole episode. You're like, this is brilliant. That is how that works.
Right. And I think there's another role that people who kind of like walk the line between several communities and can be cultural translators. Mm-hmm. It's an incredibly important one. And some folks have like a bigger stage or a smaller stage to do so. But, you know, like a recent example that came up, I think it was Jamie Foxx who tweeted something and everybody was up in arms. And
it was on Instagram.
It was on Instagram. Yeah. And I admit that even when I was like, whoa, that was, and then I read a brilliant explanation by my friend, Rabbi Sheis Rishon Manishtana. You know, he's an Orthodox African-American rabbi. He was also a speaker here in the past. And he had this long thread on Twitter explaining like the disconnect between the various audiences reading the same text. And I was like, oh, okay, I can breathe. Everything's okay. Yeah.
To make it clear for the audience, for the listeners, like what Jamie Foxx posted on his Instagram, they even killed Jesus. What do you think they will do to me? Or what do you think they'll do to you? Something to that effect. Hashtag fake friends. Now, a lot of people thought that that was an anti-Semitic remark. It was directed towards the Jews, saying that the Jewish people killed Jesus, and that's why he posted this. And so much so that even Jennifer Aniston, for liking it, which probably she didn't even read it. I tend to like every Instagram post that comes across my page. Right. I'm sure famous people don't have time to just sit there. She just likes them, and they even got backlash for that. Now, what makes this interesting is not only is they even killed Jesus, they even crucified Jesus. What do you think they'll do to you? Not only is that a very common trope in the Black community, I'm going to say something even more interesting. Amitai, 6 days earlier, I had written that to a thread in my friend group about why we get hateful responses on Instagram. Because what it simply means is Jesus, who for all accounts, never mind the religion, but is supposed to be this very good person who wanted good things for all people. By the way, Jewish. I just want to make sure everyone remembers that part. Very important. I think a lot of people forget that Jesus was Jewish, especially the ones who are like, we hate the Jews. Yeah. Do you hate the Jesus? Okay, anyway. The idea of Jesus is he's supposed to be a good guy, and they crucified that guy. What do you think?
Even that guy.
Even that guy. Exactly. What do you think they'll do to you, the regular Joe Schmo, who's not as good a person theoretically as Jesus was supposed to be? That's all it means. It isn't an attack on Jewish people, which is why so many Black people in his comments were like, I didn't even think about it having to do with the Jews. Like, question mark. They were shocked that anyone would even take it that way. And then there were people who made anti-Semitic remarks towards it, like, yeah, it was them. And then there were people who were in between. The truth of the matter is, it's a disconnect between communication. It shows you a disconnect between communities. It explains that the Black and Jewish communities, there's a disconnect that has been created, by the way. That's not the natural way of things. Much shared strife, shared struggles. This community has been torn apart from one another. And lastly, it just shows you that people are looking for a reason to use. They're looking for something to be like, this, see, this. And it's like, let's all just relax a little as the community, whether you're Black or Jewish or brown or purple or whatever we are, take a step back. We need to all just breathe together. The honest truth is, in the world, majority of people are good people. And it's unfortunate that the bad people just also happen to be the loudest people. Yeah. They're always the ones quick to say something bad or do something bad.
Yeah. And outrageous just to get the response. And then like you add the platform element, which is, you know, it's words and ink has been spilt on this. Like the algorithm perpetuates hate and feeds off polarization. So certainly you combine those, like the most outrageous, hateful people who say things to get the response, put it on a platform that prioritizes this type of level of engagement, and you got like a shitstorm that's just going to happen every time someone says something that could mean a totally other thing.
Every single time. And I'm not here to defend every black artist, by the way. That's not my intention. Like, it's not Dave Chappelle and Jamie Foxx. You're, as a person, you're allowed to not like Dave Chappelle. He's putting out stuff. You can be upset. That is your right. That is how that works. And with Jamie Foxx, I just want there to be understanding. That's my thing, is like the idea of understanding, even if you don't condone. At least we should understand one another. Let's all understand where we're coming from. And that's something that I do by default. I had no choice in my household. I always had to understand. Yeah. It's so interesting to me how different my family thought they were. And I would hear it and say, you're looking at the same story from so many different, it's the same story. You're all saying the same thing from a different side. Everybody's saying the same thing, looking at you're looking at it from this angle, and you're looking at it from this angle, and you're looking at it from this angle, and this is what it is. That is it.
Yeah. As you were speaking of this question, it's kind of like a side thing. Siblings, you have, so where are you in the order? I'm just curious.
I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest.
Okay.
Yeah, there's 5 of us. I'm the oldest, and we're all very close in age. So it's like I'm the oldest, but only because I'm the oldest. It's we're very close in age, and it's interesting because each one of them, for example, we all look different shades. You would think that, my youngest sister looks very white. My brother looks very Persian. Like, we all look different, and we're all the same. And it's interesting. We all each even have different languages that we speak to a higher degree because of which grandparent was in the household. So the languages that were prevalent in my household are Farsi, Arabic, Hebrew, French, English. Those are the 5 languages that exist amongst myself and my family and my siblings. And each one speaks one differently. Like, my youngest sister's Hebrew is amazing. My brother's French is amazing. Like, each one, and my Farsi is perfect. And we all speak all these 5 languages to a certain degree.
That's awesome.
That's a real thing.
Yeah. So I'm encouraged because, like, things seem bleak once you open any one of the apps, Instagram, Twitter, Thread. I can't even keep track. Like, we can't even today. The absurdity is that we can't even coexist on the same platform. We each have to have like a different place because one is too crazy this way or too crazy that way, and we can't create those spaces where we can come together and have these conversations, take a breath, realize that people say things they don't necessarily, the question of intent is one, and interpretation, and how can we kind of like figure out that we're all on this rock together, floating through space, and we're going to be here one way or the other. So we got to figure out how to do it together in a way that it's not in the expense of others. And so I want to I want to ask also more about your backdrop is very, very specific. And if people look at your Instagram, which they should, you have a lot that's devoted to comedy, of course, and the Laugh Factory and your shows and all that stuff, but also a huge amount is to your activism and your work. I'd say more so around what's going on in Iran. So maybe you can share with us a little bit about that. And yeah,
sure. So first, to your point of going into with people and people just saying outrageous things. I want to point out to everyone that, for example, when you look at Instagram, I'll post something and I'll get 100 comments. And out of the 100 comments, 99 comments are, "We love you, we support you, thank you so much, this is so great, and then one person will be like, "Your nose is ugly." Now, what people tend to do is they ignore the 99 comments and they go to the nose is ugly, and they're like, "No, your nose is ugly." And then it becomes a whole chain of why each other's nose is ugly. Right. And we've ignored 99 people that showed us love. So not only have we given attention to the hate, we focused on the hate, we only remember the hate, but also we've ignored all the love, which basically advocates people to hate more because at least they'll get your attention that way.
Right.
What we can do is not ignore and not dismiss, but put the hate in the place that it actually exists, in the minority of thoughts, and go and show the love, more love. And you'd be surprised, once people understand that, they'll also show you more love. You can actually fight hate with love. I do that all the time in my DMs and on my Instagram and just in general in life. I do it all the time when people have horrible comments to say about me. I think to myself, what's wrong with you?
Yeah,
It's
we
not
got to
something.
amplify. Yeah,
Exactly.
100%. It's like it ties or it tracks with this idea how, as you know, when we focus on our own, you know, if you give, I forget the exact, it's from the world of economics, right? Like, you rather the other person lose more, right, than your ability to win, right? Like this idea of, like, if you found, you know, $100 on the street, you could keep it as long as you can figure out how to split it with the other person, right? And so, like, you're like, look, 50-50, right? That's the way. And they're unwilling to budge. And in reality, like, you're better off if you gave the other person $99 and you kept one, right? Because you're still $1 richer, right?
You're
But
$1. You've already come up one,
yeah,
and
exactly.
there's no problem. And I'm
But
not
this,
saying you should give people more. What I'm saying is, like, give yourself more, give everyone more.
oh,
It's
for sure.
okay.
I'm pointing to this idea of, like,
Yeah,
how hate gets the
exactly.
focus disproportionately to what the good and the positive.
100%.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
and the thing about hate is hate and anger. Even something like $100. Let's say I try to give you something and you don't accept it. It's this gift, and I try to
Right.
give it to you and you don't accept it. So who does that item belong to? It still belongs to the person who tried to give it to you because you didn't accept it. Well, that's how I feel about hate. I just don't accept it. I
Right.
don't want that energy. No,
Right.
thank you. Thank you so much, but no, thank you.
Right.
That's
So
it.
it's not worth engaging with it. It's not worth even, yeah. And just
It's
like
not worth it.
elevating, yeah, and amplifying it.
Exactly. And here's the thing: I'm also a very petty person, and I love it because I love
It's
to be
great
petty.
material.
But
It's
it's
great.
exactly. But it's not actually like affecting my heart because I'm seeing the overpouring of love. And here's the thing, and I don't want everyone to think just because a majority thinks something, then it must be true. What I'm saying is love is usually true. Love, that good love, that pure love is actually true, not the idea of numbers. So
Right.
going to your next question, which was in regards to
Your activism, you know, in the, you know, you're fluent in Farsi, and you kind of
exactly
raise the
in
profile around
Iran.
what's going on in Iran. Yeah. Yeah.
So what's going on in Iran is something that's very near and dear close to my heart. There is the Islamic Republic regime that is in Iran's government. It's the Iranian government, and it has nothing to do with the religion. Remove the religion. I don't even talk about politics. I don't care. Even in American politics, right wing, left wing, same bird. We're all in this together.
Right.
So I never understood people are like, I hope they sink. It's like, you do realize it's the same ship. If one
Yeah.
side sinks, we all drown. So
Right.
but with the Islamic Republic, what's going on in Iran right now is that the government has been oppressing the people for the last 4 decades plus. And that's not okay. Um, Politics aside, murder, rape, torture, war, these are not political issues. These are not good, period. They're evil. And so when it comes to the people of Iran, I support their movement against the government. I support the movement against the government. This government has failed on every single level a government can fail, which is economically, it's failed, it's failed politically, it's failed spiritually, it's just failed. It is time to move on from this government. It was always time. And that's the thing. And if you notice the conflicts in the region, a lot of it ties back specifically to this. And we have enough conflict in the world. We don't need more. I support the people and I amplify their voices. I don't lead the charge. People think I'm a leader in this movement. I'm not. They think that I'm a person just because I'm an activist or an organizer, that it's my movement. It is not. Simply amplifying the voice of the people, especially these young people in Iran who don't have the hope because of everything going on.
Right.
Alongside that, I'm a big advocate of peace. If you notice, a lot of my movement, for example, I deal with a lot of things with Israel and Palestine, the Palestinian territories. I'm big on that. The reason why is because honestly, this is two groups of people that are way more alike than they are different once again. And there needs to be a peaceful, viable solution. The only reason there's actually conflict is because a lot of people make money from it. It's really not the people. The people have been programmed to hate. There is no actual hate We need to figure this out. And I always advocate for Israel and I always advocate for Palestine because if the truth, in my opinion, is there's nothing, there is nothing anti-Palestinian about being pro-Israel, and there's nothing anti-Israel about being pro-Palestinian if you do it correctly. If we do it correctly. So we need to figure that out together. And I'm a big proponent of peace in general. A thing I recently did was I was part of a group that went to Ethiopia and helped take a group of Ethiopian Alim to make Aliyah to Israel. This group who
With the Jewish Agency, that's what it was?
With the Jewish Agency, yeah. Exactly. In 6 Point, we worked together and we were a part of this wonderful experience. And there's so many people. Yehuda Satan, who's an amazing person in the Jewish Agency, and all the people that were responsible for this. Basically, we know, if you don't know about Operation Moses in the 80s and Operation Solomon in the 90s, they were these operations to basically help the groups of Ethiopian Jews who go back thousands of years to leave the persecution of Ethiopia and be able to go to Israel, which now the numbers in Israel are about 200,000 Ethiopian Jews in Israel as a result. And now there's further strife because there hasn't been a real movement since the 90s and families have been torn apart. Ethiopian Jews who haven't seen their family members in person for 30 some years. And especially in the north of Ethiopia, Gondar, there's war. And it's affecting this Jewish population. And we were able to take another group back and help them to go to the Opan and are going to be acclimated to Israeli society. Now, the thing about it is I'm a big supporter of minorities, especially because I'm a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority. So I'm a big supporter of those who need protection, no matter where it comes from, which is why I'm also a staunch supporter of fighting anti-Semitism, a staunch supporter. We just recently did the roast of anti-Semitism alongside Jeff Ross and Howie Mandel and Elon Gold and Modi and Rachel Bloom and all these wonderful comedians who came together to roast anti-Semitism. Why? Because we have enough hate in the world. We have now, I'm not saying don't critique Israel or Israel's government. We should all be able to critique all the governments of the world. That's the thing I'm fighting for the people in Iran, to be able to simply have the freedom of speech and the freedom of being able to critique your government. The simple things that we should all feel. But I hate, the one thing I hate is hate. And so I always fight that. I fight anti-Semitism. I fight Islamophobia, the stereotypes that exist there. I fight racism. I fight bigotry. I fight sexism. I fight people who are against the trans community in a certain way. All these communities who just need a little bit of protection. And actually, most importantly, just need just this much of understanding. That is who I am. And I do it in a reasonable level. Let me just say that, because people are like, oh, what about trans in sports? And I'm like, yeah, that's a conversation. We need to talk about that. Yeah. Oh, we can talk. But the truth of the matter is, that's what I do. And I do this not only through my activism, but most importantly, through my comedy, by making people laugh about it.
Yeah. And I what I love, and I really, it's really energizing for me to hear, because I think it's incredibly consistent and very, it's hopeful, but basically, and we talked about it in the beginning when it comes to comedy, but this idea of, every group should be able to express itself, and we can also mutually criticize, but it's not at the expense of the other, right? You don't have to put the other down to elevate yourself, right?
Exactly.
If we can figure out how we can improve the realities for more people, guess what? The world will be better, humanity will be better. And it's like, it's not a competition. It's not or, right? It's not or the Israelis or the Palestinians.
Exactly.
They're both there. So like, we can't ignore it, and so like, how do we make it happen?
Life is not a zero-sum game. It's not I win only if you lose. The truth is we can all win. Exactly. And right now, I know this because we're all losing. It's even the same way when it comes to something as simple as Hollywood. I have this conversation with comedians all the time who, one comedian starts to excel. There's a comedian right now, for example, his name is Matt Rife. It is his time to shine. It is his time. He has become a global comedian. And there are other comedians I see that are just they are hating Matt Rife. They're hating his success. And I'm like, why? This actually goes to the show that it could be you. That's the best part. When we're walking at night and we look up at the night sky and there's only one or two stars in the sky, we never look up again. We just keep walking about our night. But if you look up and there's a sky full of stars, we tend to look up in awe and just stare at the stars. That's how we can all be. We can all be stars in our own right. The truth is, we can all do well.
I love that. I love that. That's a beautiful imagery. And, it's a shame that it's like, it feels almost a novelty, right? To say such a thing, right? Like, we need to be better, right? And what I find like that sometimes in the discourse, it becomes tricky, and especially with like mass media and social media, is that what works for organizing and to promote causes isn't very good for community building afterwards, right? It's very good for like, if I need to advance from point A to B, then I got to set up a straw man. I got to say they're the worst in the world and they're the source of all evil and they got to disappear, because that's how we rally people. A psychological perspective of it. And then, but like, we don't consider like, well, the day after, that same person or group of people are still going to be here, and so it ends up being like a pendulum of like, who can beat down the other person more to advance their own goal, right? And then it's like, well, now we won, and then it's like, well, we're going to build up some momentum, and now we won. Instead of saying like, wait a second, let's take a deep breath. And I think it's like baked into the system, right? You talked about like the politicians; it's all the same. Like something in that we've been using this OS for so long. And it's become the normal, the norm of how we engage and run societies. It's effective, of course, but also we need to figure out how to create ways to self-correct when the tools are, they're used too much or abused to sow discord instead of actually promoting a greater good. Now, I get it that with like the greater good, there's a price they paid for minorities. And so like, that's the struggle. Like, how do we figure out and work that out in that sense? And then I'll end with like, this is one last thing, because I don't want to talk too much.
No. I love when you discuss these things, because once again, it gives me hope. Yeah. There are other people that see this, and most people see this, and yet we don't do anything about it.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. And that's why I wanted to like, even though, like pause and hear about how you work and care so deeply about what's happening in Iran, because for lots of folks in the Jewish community, it's like, Iran wants to kill all the Jews. Like Iran, and kills all the Jews, right? And that's where the conversation ends. And in fact, if we can focus on the humanity of the people there that are being oppressed for so long, and figuring out how we can be, raise their voices and work in a way to kind of to elevate these people who are in distress. There's no other way to describe it. That will be the most effective way to counter hate ultimately. And so like, that's why, I get this, you asked at the beginning, like, this is the energized me. Yeah, like this is, pretty low key guy, but like when I get to talk about these things, this is where I get, activated and excited, because, there is hope. There's real hope that we can
there is real hope. And here's the thing. When people say things like Iran wants to kill all the Jews, when Iran wants to actually kill Israel, which is the source of their conflict, right? And yet somehow by the way, they both make a lot of money together. I just want to make sure we all know this. Yeah. As governments, not the people, of course. The people are affected. But Iranians love the Jews. There are actually movements where, first of all, outside of Israel, Iran has the second largest population of Jewish people in the Middle East. Obviously, the surrounding countries, not great, which is why there's a lot of Iranian Jews. Shared heritage, shared history. Let's think about this as the idea of King Cyrus being the one to help free the Jewish people and bringing them to Iran. Esfahan being the place that looks the most like Israel for there to be a huge population of Jewish people. Purim, all these things there's an intermingling of history and culture and society, to the point where when most Iranians do 23andMe, most of them have Jewish heritage. Most of them have Jewish heritage. My father, who didn't come from a Jewish background, is something like 16% Jewish in his genetic background. And mine was slightly higher. Like I was like 26% or something. Like the idea is we are all, once again, this melting pot that we need to remember. Secondly, Secondly, we need to remember the humanity in things. It's not always us against them. It's not. Even when it comes, I always have this conversation with people because people will, for example, blame the Jewish people. Well, what happens? Let's say we snap Jewish people out of existence. Now what? Now who are you going to blame?
Yeah.
Oh, well, it's the blacks. Okay, I just did that. Now who? What about the Mexicans? I just snapped them out. Now who? What about the Asian? Gone. Now who? At some point, you're going to have to look in the mirror and be like, you're the problem, right? At some point, you can't. The world doesn't get perfect on that way. When the Jewish population makes up less than 1% of, it makes up about 1% of the world's population.
So, yeah.
If you hate the Jewish people, then you hate the wrong 1%. Trust me. They're not the ones. The other 1%, they get along just fine, and they don't care what race, religion, whatever you are. They all get along. My thing is this: I hear these crazy things, like something that I had a conversation. By the way, Amitai, I had a conversation with someone who was convinced that the Jews control the weather. Convinced the Jews control the weather, and I was like, the Jews control the weather? Have you ever been to Crown Heights? Have you felt the humidity? Have you felt the freezing?
Yeah, exactly.
Have you been to Israel? The sweat that just forms from the. You think Have you ever?
The only place Jews control the climate is in the Schwitz at the JCC, and they argue about that also.
And they argue about that the most. But have you ever been to Jamaica? It's beautiful year round. That's who controls the weather. If anyone's going to control the weather, it's the Jamaicans. Yeah. Have you ever been to? Have you ever been? It's amazing. It's the most. It's amazing weather. St. Martin. You go to these islands. Like, people just have these ideas, these notions that are just absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Yeah, they need to hang on to something. It's just
they need an enemy.
So how do we I mean, comedy is an incredibly powerful tool to elevate these questions and bring them to the forefront and educate folks about them in a palpable way, right? You said the spoonful of sugar and all that stuff. I couldn't agree more. Like, that's where I personally learn a lot about myself. Also, I do a lot of introspecting, hearing the different types of comedies and comedians. I'm like, oh, that's true to me too. And like, as a parent, as a human, whatever, it doesn't matter. But that's one. But there are other ways that we have, think about. I'm curious just to hear if, like, you've seen other ways, or that we could maybe elevate other ways that we've seen. Because like, fundamentally, this is like the Z3 Purge for a second. Like, what we're trying to do, like, in the most basic level, is to recreate a robust public square where we can dive into these complicated questions. Yes, with Israel, Zionism, Jewish peoplehood at the core of it, but it really is an avenue to all the big questions, basically, because we value, we say that like the together is way better than some like ideological purity on one end of the spectrum or the other. And it's such a difficult task because we get accused of like hiding behind objectivity and, just trying to appease a common denominator, or, some funder wants us to say some idea or whatnot. But the reality is that what we're seeing with the breakdown of society, right, with like this polarization, and it's not a uniquely Jewish problem. It's a problem of the world.
It's a problem of the world.
And how do we kind of say, you know what, we gotta slow it down, take a deep breath. We have to come together. And yes, argue and debate and disagree and get riled up. But like, at the end of the day, like, you give a hug and like you move on. Like, you have to be able to do that. And how do we work towards that resilience?
It's interesting. We don't. Your children do. Right. That's the truth. Is that your children will. That's the best part about how the world is going. Your children will learn, and they will. With us, we keep doing what we do, and despite it all, you keep going forward. There's a thing where there's a problem occurs and people go, oh, I wish someone would do something about that. And very rarely do they ever look in the mirror and go, wait, I am somebody. I can do something about that. Yeah. And even though it's just a little part, it's very little. I do very little, but I can do my little part. I can just do my little part. And if everybody did their little part, then everything would get done. So we can all just do something about that. That's why we have mirrors, is to look within, to look at ourselves. And the best part is about mirrors is mirrors are not merely for reflection. They're also for correction. When you look at a mirror and you see your collar is crooked, or there's a stain on your shirt, or it's not tucked in, you tuck it in, you wipe the stain, you fix your collar. and you now can move forward. So let's all look within. Let's examine the idea that, of course, we talk about the core, for example, of Z3 being the Jewish identity. Well, as it should be, that's how it works. But what is part of that identity? Tikkun olam, repairing the world, making it a better place. And that's not just the world for you, it's the world as a whole.
Right. And it starts with us.
Right. And it does. It starts with each and every one of us. Yeah. So many people want to change the world, and so few people are simply willing to change themselves for the better. Especially in a day and age like now, where we have Google and we have all this information. How are we more stupid? How are we more dumb now than we were? We have the most information. When you know better, you do better. So let's all do better. Let's all have actual information. Let's have discourse. Let's have conversations. Let's talk to people sometimes we disagree with and not fight. Let's have conversations. Let's talk about these things. Let's figure it out. Because ultimately, when the ozone layer is gone, we'll all be burnt to a crisp. Yeah. When the aliens come, we'll be the others. Whatever is going on in the world, there's a lot. We need to figure it all out.
Yeah. And so I take like a message I'm taking from here also is like, we got to work a lot of self-work and consistent. It's ongoing. It's never ending, right? Like in a world of like outcomes and like, show me the impact. It's like, guys, there's a lifelong pursuit of being better every day and holding ourselves accountable, and then emanating that outward to our families and our communities and our societies in a broader way. And also, when possible, I think this is part that, is remembering that we're connected, that we're connective tissue. And so for folks who can be social interpreters and help, build those bridges when there are none, or there's discord and like people are in their own kind of world, how do we work to elevate and lift each other up in a way that really does, perfect humanity, and the point of like, it's all for the next generation, and hopefully like the kids and like time, year over year, generation over generation, humanity kind of is able to lift itself up and say, hopefully, like, enough with
hopefully,
this.
Because I'm also watching TikTok and I'm not that hopeful all the time. but hopefully there's a world where people don't turn around and they go, oh, blame the Jews, blame the blacks, they learn the truth. Blame the British, because it's all their fault. Okay, all of this is their fault. Yeah. Them and those beautiful sounding British accents were able to convince the whole world to just fall apart. Yeah. Blame the Brits. That is the ultimate. That's actually my ultimate mission in life, is to get everyone to understand,
to recognize.
Yeah. What was the whole thing? It was a British mandate. Don't forget the Israel and Palestine, British mandate. They decided. You want to know what's wrong? The Brits, okay? Let's blame.
The Brits and the French sliced up the Middle East, created these weird autonomies, weird countries based on, I don't know what.
Just to hate, just so people like, oh, let's go to Africa. Oh, these people hate each other? Congo! Like, that's how they did it. That's how they did it. And that's who we should blame. Yeah. The Brits and the French. Let's remember that forever. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Let's the world.
That's like of everything, that would be the clip. Blame the Brits and the French.
Blame the Brits and the French. Let's blame the people who deserve it.
But all humanity, we should lift it up. Except
for the Brits and the French.
Yeah. But
that's, I mean, it's an interesting thing. By the way, one of the things I want to Amitai, your wife is Yemeni, and it's the only reason I would ever consider coming to your house for Shabbat, because
you have a standing invitation, Tehran.
The cooking is amazing. Listen, I adore you mostly because of your wife, the most wonderful woman.
Most people.
Most wonderful woman. So it's just it's fixing the world. It's so interesting that, even you being married to a Yemenite 20 years ago would have been unheard of.
Yeah.
Unheard. How is that? Don't we all say, oh, but we're all Jewish, and yet that would have been unheard of. The world is slowly becoming, as much as we think it's the worst place, it's because we see everything. The truth is, this is the best. When people ask me a question, they'll say, in history, for example, what time in the world would you love to live? And I was asked this exactly. I was asked this during one of these panel shows on television, and one of the people were like, I'd love to be in the Middle Ages. And then another person was like, I'd love to be in the 1800s. And someone was like, what about the Roaring 20s? And I was like, so basically you're saying Ebola, slavery, you couldn't vote. I get it.
The
I would
Spanish
love
flu,
to be, exactly. Today, as much as we think this is it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. Today, and especially, I'll tell you, when the mid 2010s was a great time. There was a lot of hope. And I'm saying this as far as the world going, not even, I never ever do the politics, because it's honestly, it's people rooting for teams instead of realizing we're all on the same team. But the idea is, right now, it's a great time. Oh, I go to the shower and I turn on the hot water and it's hot. I don't have to use a candle or,
you have running water. It's hot. You're on your own in your house with plumbing.
Exactly. And remember, even as a kid, there was this thing: if someone was taking a shower, you couldn't flush a toilet because they would freeze. We don't have that. So my thing is, instead of fighting over people with other people who also have showers in their homes, my goal is to go to the people that don't have showers in their homes and try to get them showers too. That's what I would rather do with my time. I would rather go, the same people that can't go to their faucet and just turn on the water, let me go help them get water. Yes. Have I been to Africa, to the programs where I dig wells? Yeah, I have, because they don't even have that to fight over. They don't have we're fighting over, it's groups of people who have Fiji water in their refrigerators fighting for what? I'm going to go help them. I'm going to go help the people that have the ability to fight. We're fighting over who's kneeling and who's not, and what side to hold the flag. I'm going to go to the people who they're all meant to kneel. I'm going to let them know that they can stand up too. That's what I'm going to do. That's why it's called stand up. Because I try to stand up for the things that I believe in.
That's great. That's awesome. So it's like, I'm like, I have more questions, but this is, it's been,
ask any question.
It's been great. I look,
yes, I'm single. Just ask. I'm looking for a wonderful, amazing, and honestly, what means the most to me as for a partner, just to let you know, for anyone who's interested, is that you be rich. I don't even care at this point. Listen, rich Jewish girl. At this point, I'll take a rich Jewish guy. Anyone rich. If you're rich, you don't even have to be Jewish at this point. Actually, to be very fair, anything. I'll take anything. Just my lifestyle, it's very expensive and prices keep going up. Okay. I just want to let you know I'm down for whatever. So
no, I first of all, not to be too much of a yenta like my grandmother would be, but we talk about kids and family, etc. The next generation, that is the way, right? I believe that is the way to make the world better, is to prepare the next generation for that. Put that aside so we don't get into some other, it could be, that conversation can also lead to, it's a sidetrack a little bit, but I do want to come back to this the idea of standing up and lifting up people and the world that we live in, and having focusing on the good, seeing the good in where we are and seeing that in other people and other communities, and focusing on that, and just that should be our North Star, just keep, that should be keeping the way. I think we could wind this down a little bit because we're coming up in an hour and I want to be mindful, but I'm going to hold my tongue. We'll save it for part 2 in episode 872. I'll be like, Tehran in my 5th episode, and now, bring it back for my follow-up questions. But this has been great. Really, I appreciate it. And I really applaud all the work that you do. I find it incredibly inspiring. And I really do, it's great to see how, the recognition around that is growing across your craft as well as the message, and how you blend the two. And I really thank you for your time, and I want to wish you all the success in continuing to speak truth to power, and being an ambassador for a better world, and a successful truth teller and cultural interpreter, so we can keep those seams, those stitches tied together, and not just kind of fraying over the place. So I really, really want to thank you for
everything you do.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I literally just mean your wife. I actually don't like you that much, but you're amazing. Your kid's amazing. Everything. No, but honestly, thank you so much for everything you do. I always appreciate people who basically don't just talk about it, they are about it. And that's who you are. You dedicate so much time and effort into goodness in the world in every single way. You inspire me. So thank you so much. I
Thank you.
appreciate you for having me on the show and always making me feel welcome and included, and
Of course,
also just making me feel comfortable and as if I belong. That's
you
really
do.
what it comes down to, and I appreciate that because I don't always get to feel that. I talked about one thing about your kids, and I'm gonna tell you something that happened to me that it was one of the most defining situations in my life. And I've seen the way you are with your family, and it just reminds me of that. When I was a kid, being mixed was very new. Everyone, of course, we're so used to people kind of being mixed now. It's normal. But honestly, in the United States, it was illegal for black and white people
Right.
to be married until the
It's
70s.
nuts. It's like
That is a
it's
real
yeah.
thing. There was a court decision on it, the Loving decision. I mean, that was a real thing. So it's a very new thing. And going into the 80s, it was still very new, so much so that people didn't understand. There were movies about why there were certain people who were light skinned. And in the 90s, so here I am growing up and I'm a child. I was in kindergarten and I'll never forget this moment. It was one of the most defining moments in my life. As a child, my mom was the one who always came to pick me up. And of course, my mom is black and she would come pick me up. And, it was a very normal interaction between the teachers and the school and myself. But one day, my dad had to come pick me up. And the school was not releasing me into my dad's custody. They couldn't understand how, they always understood how this black woman was my mom, but they couldn't understand how this olive, fair skinned, Middle Eastern looking man was my father. They couldn't understand it. And his English wasn't such that he was explaining it, but they just wouldn't take his word. And I remember as that happening, that as a kid, I didn't know these feelings. They were feelings I'd never felt before, but I felt things that I came later to understand were shame
Mm.
and embarrassment. And I remember feeling that. And I also remember my father just being very Middle Eastern at that moment and pushing the teachers kind of aside and just grabbing me in his arms and lifting me and just said the words, my son.
Wow.
And in that moment, I felt nothing but love. To him, it wasn't about what I looked like or what skin color I had, it was just I was his son. And to me, that meant you belong here. You belong. And he took me. And that always served as my North Star to remind me I never have to justify my existence or why I'm here. I'm here. And I want everyone to feel that same love that I felt in that moment, that just unconditional love, my son. And we all belong. We all deserve to be here.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm like, now I see my kids and I'm it's incredible. And I can't imagine being in that moment and as a child feeling that is incredibly, it could be devastating and I appreciate you for sharing that with me and with our listeners. And I will take that with me, and making sure that when we welcome folks into our spaces, people, and as participants, community members, presenters, it doesn't matter. The number one thing needs to be about, this is a place where you belong and we see you and you're valued for who you are. And from there we work outwards. And so we can lift up and uplift
That's true.
everybody.
The full sentence was actually, my son didn't clean his room, and that's what made me.
I'm here to get it for that.
And he's not a doctor. I take him, but that's the thing, and that's what I try to do with my comedy, and that's why you inspire me. So thank you so much for having me on this program. I hope people, at least, if nothing else, enjoy and come to a show. I have a show at the Laugh Factory every Thursday called Tehran Thursdays. I bring comedians from all around the world, all in one place and one stage, and I bring people together. I also am part of this comedy show called Comedy for Peace. Started with Eric Angel, where we go to different communities and we bring them together, and we do shows. And I do a show in Israel and Palestine, basically yearly, where I start in Tel Aviv, then I go to Ramallah, then Bethlehem, and then Jerusalem, where everyone can be together in one place. And I bring people together who never thought they'd be in the same room, and they're all laughing together. And it's created some lifelong friendships. And to be honest, what I just realized, and I got a couple messages the last 2 years, is a couple of the shows have actually created children. So there are people who never thought they'd be in the same room are now with child together.
Amazing.
And they blame me. I just want to let you know, they blame me. And so thank you to those families who reach out and let me know. And thank you to everybody who's supportive and showing love. Find me on social media at I am Tehran, IAMTEHRAN. My name is Tehran, like the capital of Iran. So if you don't know how to spell it, just watch Fox News. Literally
within the 10 seconds. Yeah.
Every day. So thank you.
Yeah. So please, show up and support and follow and go to the show. I, for one, certainly enjoyed this conversation. Of course, your show live here was incredible, and I always learn a lot. So thank you. Until our next conversation.
Bye.